Well, there you are. I think you're the coolest cosmopolitan there is. I mean, straight from New York to this stage.
I could only make it because of the German Autobahn. You know, you shouldn't ask the guy driving the speed on the.
But we have no speed limit, which is a very hotly debated topic for another time, I think. Carlo, you work with the Sensible City Lab at the MIT. Yeah.
Yeah. We spell it like sense-able, so like both able to sense, but also as a sensible city. We don't like the idea of smart city that puts so much emphasis on the technology side, but the sensible we thought puts more the same principles but applied to people in the city.
Right. Let's take the temperature of the room for a second. How many of you live in a city? How many of you live in a different place than you were born in? I think it's safe to say we're amongst fellow cosmopolitans.
Yeah.
Which is great because we talked before we met here on stage. We talked before and it sounds like you have a rather positive outlook on the future of cities. And I think it has also to do with that you are working on sensible cities and not on smart cities. So let me just dumb down the gist of the pandemic city news, which was the city is dead, the office and real estate and commercial real estate industry is bust, and we're all gonna turn into hikikomoris, these Japanese shut-ins, forever living and once in a while being able. So how much of that doom and gloom scenario will be with us? I mean, it has been with us.
Yeah, Andrian, no, you're right. And I think this tells you about the difficulty of looking at the future. Just 2 years ago, everybody was saying cities are dead. Just there were a few dissenting voices. I'm happy I was one of them. Rich Florida, we wrote a few things about this. Well, this doesn't make sense. Our cities emerged around 10,000 years ago, when humanity discovers this magic way, this new way to bring us together so that together we can be more than each of us individually. So, and that's where this kind of big human adventure of cities starts. But cities over 10,000 years, in over 10,000 years, I've gone through many pandemics, through many devastation, many wars, and they've always come back. And you know what? Because the force that brings us together is much stronger than all of those forces all of those centrifugal forces, that pushes us away. And no surprise, it has happened again. We're all happy. It's the same force, I think, that brings us here to DLD, to the magic of physical encounters in physical space. The same that happens about the city, and the same, I believe, that will bring us back to our offices. Maybe not 5 days a week, but we'll go back to work in person. I believe. Would you want to do another survey in the room? Who works still fully 100% digitally? Okay, but not that many.
That's right.
Well,
but on the other hand, I mean, contrary to like the early 20th century when the last big pandemic happened, the Spanish flu, that we didn't have Zoom back then. We were forced to come back to the city, and we were forced to innovate the city. So
you're right. You're right, and actually think about what would have happened if the same pandemic happened even just 10 years ago. Without Zoom or with much less connectivity, or 20 years ago. So somehow with all the bad things with the pandemic, it was lucky that it accelerated us instead of blocking us. They could have happened again just a few years ago. But the reason I believe that we need to go back to the offices is a piece of research we haven't published yet. You can find a preprint online, but I'll tell you just the gist of it. Before COVID, we started monitoring in an anonymized way all of the MIT network, the MIT email exchanges. So you don't know anything about the individual and so on, but you build the network. You know how the network is structured, and you look at the network's property. Like I exchange an email with you, and there's 2 nodes with the link, even if you don't know who they are. And we started doing this after going through the ERB, the Ethical Review Board, just a few months before the pandemic. And then the pandemic happens, and that's the experiment you can never do, which is to take one variable and then you discontinue it. That variable is physical space. And what you observe, and again, a paper is under final reviews, but you find a preprint online. He's also with Robin Dunbar. You might know Robin Dunbar from the Dunbar number about, again, human connectivity, how many friends on average we have. And what we discover is if we don't meet in physical space, our social networks become weaker and weaker. I could go a bit more in detail. You know, there's something in social networks called weak ties or weak links. That the people we know, actually, a lot of the magic that happens here at DLD or in similar places, the people who are not friends of our friends, but it bridges to a different community. And while all of them actually happen a lot in physical space, happen with a mathematical dependence to the distance of where we are in physical space. And if we don't meet in physical space, what we observe after 2 years of remote working, smart working, virtual working on the MIT campus, is actually that our social networks suffer. All of those weak ties, so important for creativity, tend to disappear. So anyway, in a nutshell.
When we're talking about social networks and we're talking about offices, I mean, maybe it's too soon to say, but every crisis has the chance for innovation. It's always like, can you already talk about innovation? Can you already make jokes about crisis? Anyway, there's always room for innovation, like the big pandemics of the 19th century created the sewer system of London, and I don't want to compare office life with the sewer system, but similarly, office life was in a crisis before the pandemic happened, both in the social media network environment and also as office life, because it was kind of torn between that like 50s, 60s hierarchy model and then the whole like think outside of the box models, and it didn't really fit together yet. So are we now at the cusp of an innovation phase of the office?
I would say so. So I think, you know, again, if you go back 2 years ago, I think the first company was Twitter, who said, oh, from now onwards, we will always work digitally. Again, based on our data, based on our research, we believe that we need to meet in physical space. But as you're saying, at the same time, that doesn't mean we need to go back to what it was there before. And I'm pretty sure a lot of us will want to continue with the flexibility of spending, you know, 1 or 2 or even 3 days in a more flexible way, working from home, working from another city, you know, organizing our lives in a different way. And that means then how we can redesign the office. And that's, with our design office, you know, at MIT we do the research, we also implement it with our design office in New York and in Italy as a base. And what we're doing is really looking at how then, even if we spend less time together, how can we rebuild a choreography of office life that actually allow us to strengthen our networks, and that clearly then turns into architecture.
Mm-hmm. So one thing that the pandemic also made very clear, that there's a huge gap between the knowledge workers, or mostly knowledge workers who can actually work at an office. Yeah. And then you have the service workers who did get an upgrade to being essential workers, otherwise they didn't really get much other upgrades. So it seems there's a gap widening now. You worked also, you did a very granular study on Stockholm during the pandemic, and also you addressed that issue of the widening gaps that were basically accelerated by the pandemic. Can you tell me about that?
Totally. And yes, you know, I think as we all know, every time there's a new technology, there's a new divide. And then hopefully over time, we can bridge some of those divides. Think about, you know, the digital divide, luckily, in most of the world now, because of different type of connectivity, 4G, 5G, or, you know, or cable. So that divide has been shrinking. But you're right, you know, and we look at this, you know, there's a big divide. And we've been measuring this in Stockholm with, together with Richard Sennett, a sociologist. Richard and I teach a class together at MIT. And we look at this idea of liminal ghettos. So, you know, ghettos in the past, we could see them. The first ghetto actually comes from a neighborhood in Venice that's called the ghetto. And that was actually a ghetto, the Jewish ghetto. It was something so physical. It has a big door, and you could see, you know, that was closed at night, and you had to go through it in order to access the ghetto. And in the 20th century as well, the ghettos, think about the black ghetto, the gay ghetto, you know, those places were also very visible to the naked eye. But together there's something more insidious. There's kind of a liminal ghetto, a ghetto that's much more difficult to show. And that's when it becomes interesting because, again, with not with the naked eye, but you could say with the eye of Homo electronicus, with the augmented eye, the eye that uses big data, a lot of the things we've been discussing here at DLD, then through that, you can actually see it. And that's what we looked at in Stockholm. We saw that these ghettos actually increased during the pandemic, precisely for the reasons you said. But then once we're able to see them, then it's the first step in order to fix them. So I think, yeah.
Give me some examples of the liminal ghetto. Like, what did you actually see? How did you, and how did you basically identify?
Well, I don't want to bore people with the big data analytics, but the principle is that, again, you analyze communication flows, you see who's connecting with whom, you also analyze mobility flows, all anonymized and aggregated, and what you see is really how the city, this magical thing to bring us together, sometimes is also a device that separates us. These fault lines in the city that create this kind of separation, segregation. Now, the interesting thing, more than if anybody's interested in the mathematics and the big data, it's online. All the papers, by the way, we make them accessible to everybody on our website, so you find them there. The interesting thing is actually what are the things then that we can do in order to bring people together as designers. Mm-hmm. And there you realize that there's a number of very interesting things. Parks work a lot as places that bring us together and create those new connections. Public spaces, of course. Schools are very important. What you see with schools is that they actually bridge across communities, but they work not only when people must go to school, so say during term time or during the week, then that function continues and perpetuates also during the summer or when the school is closed. So somehow they're very beautiful social connectors and integrators. So anyway, so that's more how we can address some of those issues.
So who lives in these liminal ghettos? Who are the actual people?
Well, it's what you're seeing is, in the liminal ghettos means, groups that don't communicate with the rest of the city, and it can actually happen at in different strata of society. Mm-hmm. So clearly, as you mentioned, some of the people, for instance, who work more from home or less from home, I think the pandemic has increased this because of change in the mobility patterns. Clearly, by the way, that is related to a concept that everybody now is talking about, or this idea of 15-minute city. So now again, you do a neighborhood where you got everything you need within a 15-minute radius. But what you realize is actually if we were to build the city just as 15-minute cities, there would be a city of villages, or even worse, a city of enclaves, or of ghettos, where people just meet there, and you got the 15-minute with rich people, a 15-minute with poorer people, and don't communicate with each other. So somehow, no, that is not about who lives there, but is actually how much we connect with each other, how much we explore the magic of the city, which is to connect all of us together and not just a subset.
But the liminal ghettos, they do have the kind of justice aspect to it, right? There's economical differences that are probably cemented like in any other traditional ghetto center.
They are. And what you see, but when you look at the definition, it becomes almost a ghettoization. It can be at every level of society, but basically it's an enclave, either for the rich, the poor, or different communities, or based on different type of attributes for the population.
Right. So one of the great promises of America was always like, you go there as an immigrant, you start at a ghetto, and then you make your way out of the ghetto, not by leaving the country, but by leaving your social class. Yeah. So how do you leave the liminal ghetto?
Yeah, and by the way, now you mentioned America. I'm really concerned about what's going on in America with extreme polarization. Maybe here there's something else we can say. No, so what I see today is actually much more upbeat about Europe than a few years ago. Actually, the other thing that I find super interesting is that, Italy, that has always been, Italy today seems to be the most stable country in the world. When you compare with what's happening in France, in the UK, I don't know if it is a good sign or not, but I find it very surprising. And the US is really in a very difficult situation. I think a lot of you come from the US, but in terms of this extreme polarization. Now, what I wanted to mention there is that, again, I think the best antidote we have to that, and a lot of that has been brought by social media, as we all know. Social media that's based on polarizing people and polarizing because antagonistic messages are actually much faster to be retweeted and to be jumped upon. And then the best antidote we have to that is similar to what we were saying before, is actually the city. So the city has a beautiful dimension you don't have in digital, which is inevitability. Inevitability means, you need to confront diversity. If you're here in this room, we got different ideas, we need to find a solution if we have a debate, it's, in the conversations that happen here, that happen in public space and so on. In digital space, it's so easy. You just, block people, and just, unfriend them. And then you stay only in your bubble, and then you diverge, which is unfortunately what's happening in the US.
As a designer or a city planner, how can you burst these bubbles?
Well, I think architecture responds to life, also influences life, but also responds to the way we live. So I think what we should start doing is spend again more time interacting in physical space. It can be the space of the office, as we were saying. It can be traditional public spaces of the city. I mean, that's really, I believe, the antidote to what we're seeing.
To summarize, talking about spending time, I would love to spend more time with you, but I can't because there's a big red number there telling us we're about to close. But
yeah, but these days even Lufthansa is late, so I think we can take a few more seconds.
Very good. So give us a little bit like a summarized outlook on the future of the city. How do you see? Is it at the cusp of innovation? Does it even need innovation? Does it just maybe need tweaking? So what is your outlook on the future of the city, and how positive is it?
Yeah, well, I will not try to, as we said, we started by saying that predictions 2 years ago, which is not a long time ago, were all kind of screwed up. We saw that we were thinking the city is over, and actually the city is back in all of its force. So I will not try to do a prediction. We see that the future, like Karl Popper said, is something we need to build together. It's not something if you predict it, yeah, it's chance. You might get it right or not, but the future is something to build together. So what I would say, the future of tomorrow is what we will build together. And the three key forces there behind it will be people, people, and people.
All right.
But it's great to be here, and I look forward to continuing the conversation today, and then here, and then for those of you who come also to Davos in the next few days.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Andrew.
All right.